All right, welcome back to Photoshop 2024. And today we're mostly going to go over what the different adjustments over here do. But first, we're going to stop off way over here and use everyone's favorite crop tool. So I'm going to show you how to use that crop tool and just kind of a few of the intricacies of it. So the crop tool is right here. This little tool is actually called a scaleograph and something that we used to use back in the film days. And when you click on it, you get this little bounding box that we see right here. And if we click inside of it, you'll see that right now we're getting the rule of thirds. However, you can change that. You can come up here to this icon, click on that, and you can choose any of these things that we see up here. For my case, I'm going to keep it on rule of thirds because that's what I'm going to use. Now, to use the crop tool, at first we are in ratio, and notice there's nothing there and nothing there. And what that means is I can take this corner or any end of the box and make this any shape that I want. All right. It's just kind of a free form tool. You can make it however you want. The trick here is whenever you're using a ratio, I'm just going to hit escape so it goes back to the beginning. And there are some ratio presets. So we have square and it would make it square. We could come in here. We can make it 4x5, 5x7, 2x3, which is native what a 35 millimeter shoots to, and 16:9. So let's go ahead and just do 5x7. And this would be the ratio to make a 5x7 print. But this is the trick. It's just the ratio, meaning that this dimension and this dimension are always in a 5x7 ratio. If I was to go ahead and just hit return and apply that ratio to it, it's the ratio is 5x7, but the image is not 5x7. And to see that, let's go into image size. And you'll notice right here, we'll switch this to inches, that it is right now it's 56 inches by 40 inches, which is a 5x7 ratio. So if I was to take the height and make that 7, you'll notice this is almost perfectly 5. And then I could change this if I wanted to print it to like, let's say 100 pixels. And now this would be resized at 5x7, 300 pixels per inch, and that would be to print. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and hit cancel. So a lot of people get confused when they come over here, they click on this, they see 5x7, they think it's getting size for a 5x7. That is not true. This is the ratio of the image, and this is this dimension and this dimension. If you, right now, this is in a vertical or a portrait mode. If you want to flip it, there's some little flippy flop arrows up here. You click it, it makes the 5 on the other side, and now it's a landscape image, all right? You can also hit the flippy flop arrows again, and if you want to do it manually, you can drag a corner and just drag down. So what I'm doing is dragging this direction, and I'm saying, hey, make, boom, it horizontal, right? So we can grab a corner and move the corner. Notice it's just moving from that point. It's not moving here. We could grab an edge, and it's just moving that image right equally in and out from this edge. This edge isn't moving, but this edge is. Here's where it gets tricky. Let's go ahead and flip this again, hit escape. And so we'll come out here and we'll move it. So a corner moves in here, down, but it's not moving this edge. If you want to move this so that all images move in, meaning from this corner, this corner, this corner, this corner, and move in exactly the same, you hold your Alt or your Option key down and you drag one of these edges and it will drag in from basically this location point, which is usually going to be in the center. You could move it though. So where it's moving in and out equally from those locations. If you want to, and I'm going to hit clear. So now we're in that kind of free form mode, right? If you want it to lock in the ratio, you hold shift. Come here, you hold shift and notice it's locked in that ratio. Even though I'm in the free form, I can't go out of that. So I'm doing shift, doing it. You could also lock in the ratio and hold the Alt or Option key and it would all go in from the center if that's how you wanted to crop. If you want to rotate your image, you just go outside. You see how it turns these right angle arrows. You left click and hold and you rotate and out. All right. So that will allow you to rotate your image. If you had a line, and we don't really have a line in this, but I can still show you how to do it. There's a little straighten up here. And so if you click on that, it's basically a level. And so if I was to make this what I want level, it's going to level to this line, which is going to really rotate this counterclockwise. But you would basically put this on an up and down or either horizontal or vertical line, and it would rotate it to that level and then make it perfectly up and down. So one thing I could actually do is I could make it level to this stick. So I could say if this stick was level and I draw a straight line, boom, it's going to level that stick there. And notice how it's not cropping outside of those areas. Let's go ahead and hit escape to get out of that. The next thing, and probably one of the most important things, is something up here called delete crop pixels. And so if you click this, when you size this, all right, and then hit return, and if I click on it again, notice the rest of the area is gone. It's deleting those pixels. You don't usually want that. So I'm just going to hit Command Z. I'm going to hit escape and then Command Z to go back in time. And if I turn this off this time, we'll do the same thing. I'm going to crop it out, but watch what happens, because delete crop pixels is not on. I'm cropping it, but when I click on it, the rest of the image is still there. It's just cropping it and you don't see it, but it's not removing it like it was before. So up here, we have next the fill. And I actually like the fill a lot, but there's a couple of different options now. So let's go ahead and click on it. So we've got content aware fill, generative expand, and transparent. So let's see what the three do. So I'm just going to take this crop and I'm going to move it up out of the image. And notice it's giving me a transparent area. I'm going to hit return and it does nothing because it's just transparent default. That's what we want. So let's go back, do it again. And this time we want to get back on our image. And this time we're going to change to the older one, which is content aware fill. I'm going to make that bigger and watch what happens when I apply it this time. All right, so content aware fill was able to like regenerate or recreate this area. And it does a really good job when the area is simple like this. But if we go down here and we try to go below this and have it create this, it might not do it as well. So let's go ahead and see what it does. It might do a good job. Yeah, you can see it does some funky things in some locations, but it's not that bad. So what happens if you have an area where you just wish you had a little more negative space? A lot of times you can recreate it using content aware fill. Then we'll go back in time. And the last one is new. So we've got the generative expand, and this is the new artificial intelligence. One thing to remember, you have credits and you can only use these generative commands so many times before you run out of credits in a month. I don't know what that is. You'll have to look it up. I've not run out of it because I don't really use it that much. But this does it, and it does a better job, but it's also a lower quality. So if you do a big area, remember it's only doing like 1040p right now. So it's not the highest quality, but it does a good job. So we can do generative expand. I can come up here. We'll go up a little bit this way, come down here, and we'll go down that way a little bit, and we'll hit OK. It's asking us what we want to generate. I'm not going to say anything. I just wanted to generate the ends. So let's see what it comes up with. See, it did a good job up here, and it actually did a pretty good job down there. And it's something that you really can't tell. So either generative expand or content aware usually work pretty good depending on it is. I think if you have a more complicated area with texture or detail, generative expand is going to work better. But in general, I usually just try content aware first. If that doesn't work, try the other one, see which one works best. These are pretty cool little options. We're going to just go back in time though. So one last thing in the crop tool, we're going to click on this and we're going to go down here to the WH and resolutions. And so this is width, height, and resolution. So if you remember before in the ratios, we just changed the ratio. In this method, we can change the ratio and add a resolution, which is going to resize the image. So what we're going to do here is we're going to tell it in inches. Right now, you can see it's in pixels because I'm usually working in pixels. But if I want my top area, so I think this is a 6:9 image here. If I make this 6, I need to hit space IN. If you don't hit IN, it's going to make it in pixels, which will be teeny tiny. And you can put any numbers in here you want. And so I'm going to put 9, space IN, and you can see got that ratio. So now the ratio is set 6:9. But I'm also adding 300 pixels per inch. So what this is going to do is not only change the ratio, but it's going to size it to 6 inches by 9 inches at 300 pixels per inch, which is a printing resolution. And we'll learn this later on, more of what this means. You're just going to have to take it for granted. So now when I hit return, now when I click on this and hit return, it's resizing that image. So if we were to go to image size, you'll now notice if we go to inches that this is 6:9. You'll notice this is 6 at the width by 9 at 100 pixels per inch. So just a little disclaimer, when you're sizing for print, you need resolution. When you're sizing for the web, do it in pixels and resolution doesn't matter. You're just going by this number. We'll get into that later. I'm going to hit cancel because we don't really need that. All right, so let me hit Command 0. That's just going to enlarge this image out. We'll get rid of the crop tool. And let's go up here to the adjustments. And so we did curves and maybe levels last time, but let's just take a look at what's available. Now, I'm only going to tell you what's available. I'm going to tell you what I use. So do I use hue saturation? Yes. And this is the reason. A lot of times when you get color in an image, it's not correct. So the way you saw it and the way that it's rendered in Photoshop, it's off a little bit. So you need to shift it around for a variety of reasons. It's just not because the camera messed it up or there was a conversion issue. Who knows? Whatever reason, doesn't make a difference. You need to shift the color. Click hue saturation. We've got our hue saturation adjustment, and remember our mask over here. I'm going to click on this because we want it. So over here right now, we're working in master. You almost never work in master unless you wanted to just boost up the saturation to make colors more intense or reduce them to make them less intense, okay? But it's not something that you would normally use. So it's really hard to get the numbers like right on 0. So a little trick is if you double click saturation, it automatically goes back to 0. So in this image, we've got a lot of red. So let's say I want that red to be a different color. What I would do is go to master and then red, which is the color I have. We've got hue, which changes the color. So if I go to the left, that's making it more reddish magenta. And if I go to the right, it's going to make it more yellowish green. Okay. So it's shifting that color. I can really shift that color a lot. So let's make this image a little warmer. Next, we have saturation. So if we take saturation and lower it, it's going to completely remove all the red in the image. And if we go to the right, it's going to increase the saturation. Once again, it's not something I'm going to use. Double click saturation. Lightness, just think of it as brightness. So it's making the reds brighter this way and darker this way. In this image, we don't really need to adjust that. We're just shifting that one color. If I wanted to do something with the yellow colors, and most of the time you're either doing red or yellow, or sometimes you might be removing some blues or cyans. But those are mainly the colors that you're using, red and yellow. So if I wanted to desaturate some of the yellow, I can just slide that to the left. If I want to increase it, I can slide it to the right. If I want to change the color of the yellows, we can slide that and change the color of the yellows. Might look weird and like, wait, why in the world would you want to do that? You're just going to have to believe me for right now. Colorize, we'll get into this, but it's just a way to kind of colorize an image. That is hue saturation. The next thing that we have down here is brightness contrast. And brightness contrast can do exactly what curves levels can do as well. It's simpler, I think, for people to understand. If you go to the right, it makes it brighter. If you go to the left, it makes it darker. Contrast is making your darks darker and your lights lighter, or the opposite. So you can lower your contrast to make your image flatter, or you can increase your contrast and make it darker. I don't use brightness contrast. It's because I can do both of those and more in curves. So we saw curves before. Curves has a lot of different things that you can do with it. So we have auto curves where I could click it and it will automatically tone to how it thinks it should look, which is 99% wrong most of the time. We have little pointers over here where we can set black, set gray, and set white. I do not use those, right? This little thing is called a targeted adjustment, and it's not in everything, but basically you click on it and you go to an area with a value. So let's say I go into this dark area. I click on this and then I adjust this. And you can see it's finding out where that is on the curve and adjusting it. So it's a targeted adjustment. So if you don't know where like the values are on an image, we'll get rid of that. I'm not sure what it's doing here with these little transplant areas. There's some sort of an issue going on. Once again, we'll go to the targeted adjustment, go to the lighter area and move it up and down. So this is darkening it and you can see it's adding this little point to the curve. I don't need that. I've been using it for so long. I can just come in here and adjust the curve how I want it. Curves can also be done in the red, the green, and the blue channel. These are usually used for toning or shifting color. So if I go into the red channel and I move this up, I'm making it more red. And if I move it down, I'm making it more cyan. So you can actually do some color correction in curves. And I do use that. Also, it's a good thing for split toning and things like that. But let's go back to the red, green, and blue channels. Remember, this is your highlight slider right here. This is making your highlights brighter. This is making your contrast increase, right? And that's just those two sliders. Otherwise, let me just throw that away. This way is making it brighter. This way is making your highlights grayer or darker. This way is making your image flatter. This contrast like we saw. And then we have this line. And so this would be like our highlight areas, our shadow areas, and our midtone areas. So if I wanted to darken the highlights, I can come here. And if I want to bring the line back up to the curve, I can set another point. And look, you could set a million points on here, but it's going to do funky things and not look good. If you want to remove a point, just click on it and hit delete. You can also throw it away. So what I'm doing when I throw it away is I'm left clicking and holding, and as I go like that, I let go. So meaning, whew, let go, throw. So that's using curves, all right? So we can do a lot of stuff with curves, more than levels or anything else. Levels is similar. We've got the black, the gray, and the white points, meaning you could set black. That would make it 100% black, which is usually what you never, ever want to do because nothing is usually that black, so I don't usually set that black. Gray will try to make color balance it. We'll try to make this a neutral gray wherever I click, and it's not really beneficial or doing anything. And then white point, it would be to set a perfectly white point. You only want to do that if you have a white with no value. We're not going to get into that right now. It's not something that I ever use. So up here we have, once again, our shadows. We're increasing the contrast by going to the right. We're brightening our highlights. A lot of people will refer to it as midtones, but it's actually called gamma. But just think of it as your midtone areas. We're changing the way that looks. We can come down here and flatten our grays, and we can darken our highlights, just like we did before. So just as in curves, we have the option to go into red, green, blue, and we have auto over here. So I'm going to turn these off just so we're not doing too much funky stuff to our image. Here we have color balancing. You think color balance is the most logical place to adjust color. I'm going to tell you this and listen. Do it in Adobe Camera Raw before you get to Photoshop because it's much more accurate. Can you do some cool things in here? Occasionally I use it, but very rarely. Most of the time color adjustments are hue saturation for me. So you'll notice right here we've got midtones, shadows, and highlights. So you can pick those. By default, it's in midtones. This is really easy. If you go this way, it adds more cyan. If you go this way, it adds more red. Same thing with magenta, yellow, and blue. Preserve luminosity means as you adjust this, it's not changing the brightness level of the image. If you did want it to change the brightness level, you would click that little button off. Down here, just so we're getting into this stuff, if you hit this, this is a reset to bring everything as a reset. Almost all of them have that. Right here, this is called a clipping mask, and we'll get into a clipping mask much later on in the tutorial series. And if you wanted to delete a layer, what you were doing, you could hit delete and it would remove that. So let's move on down to black and white. So this is the way to convert an image to black and white, all right? A way to convert. It's not converting it, to convert. So you hit black and white, you get now an auto adjustment. You have default and some presets available. And basically what this allows you to do is change the color. So if I had an area that had red in it, I can change that red, make it brighter or darker. Yellow, green, blue, magenta, all that stuff. So I can change that. The image looks black and white. It has removed all color. However, this image is still in RGB, meaning that if I come up here to color balance and I just add a whole bunch of yellow and some red, it's going to tint that, all right? It's actually black and white looking, but it hasn't actually converted it to black and white yet. So if you do want to convert this to a true black and white image, you would need to go to Image Mode, Grayscale, as we see right here. Click Grayscale. It's saying, hey, do you want to merge all these layers together? I hit no, I don't really want to do that. And right here it's saying, can we disregard and remove all color adjustments since we don't need those anymore because there's no color. So anything that had to do with color, it's removed that. So now it's in true black and white image. You can see up here, it now says gray. Normally it would say RGB. All right, so now we're in a true black and white mode. All right, so we're back into color. Next thing that we have down here is exposure, which is really similar to brightness contrast, just another way to do something. I've never used it. So we can change the exposure value, the offset value, and the gamma correction, all right? It's doing the exact same stuff that you could do in curves. I just don't find it beneficial. All right, the next thing that we have is Vibrance. And what Vibrance does it increases the color of the muted colors, but the areas where there's bright color, it doesn't affect it at all. So you can brighten them or reduce that, whatever you'd want to do. Saturation is just going to increase the saturation of everything. So all colors are going to get more intense. So it's important to understand the difference between vibrance and saturation because they are different. Selective color is just like hue saturation, but it works a little bit differently. So you'll notice right here, we've got the colors. It doesn't work with all colors. We're just doing reds. So right now it's the reds. Inside the red colors, we can adjust the values of cyan. We can do magenta and green and yellow and blue. And we can also control the blacks. So we can make the blacks darker or lighter, depending on what we want to do. Now, you'll notice the main difference between selective color and hue saturation is there's no saturation adjustment. You're just adjusting the color, but you can't do anything adjustments with saturation. It is helpful to refine colors. I tend to use hue saturation first. If I can't get it correct, then maybe I'll make a selective color adjustment to see how that's going to work. Next, we have photo filters, and this is just for doing effect. And a lot of these are old filters that we used to use in black and white film. So that's why you see these 85A and things. Those refer to the filters that we'd use on the cameras. So we have some warming filters. You can make it red, orange, whatever you want to see or do right here, or you can even pick your own. So let's go ahead to the warming color filter. So it's making it warmer. I think the easiest way to see this is to do the black and white and then to do the photo filter. And so right here, our density of this is only 24%. If we want more of it, we slide to the right. If we want less of it, we slide to the left. If we want to have a specific color, you can click on this, pick any color you want, and then it's going to adjust and make it that color that we see right there. That is a photo filter. So gradient map, I think it's just easier to click on it and show you what it's doing. We'll get into this more. We're just going to cover this real quickly. Right now, the gradient is black and white. That's not too helpful for us. So let's go into blues. And so what it's going to do, it's going to color the image according to which one of these we pick. So if I pick this dark, funky color, it's going to make a gradient of that. All right. I think I'm going to reverse this. Nope, we're going to keep it as it is. So we've got this gradient. So it's making The shadow area is this purple and the highlight area is this blue. This is what's known as a split tone. And so then we can adjust this to the image. So I could lower this percentage of it so it blends in and looks a little bit better. It's not so strong at 100%. Or we could come up here and go to color, and we could blend using some color blending modes, which we'll get into. But all it's really doing is colorizing this side, this color, and this side, this color. You can kind of control where the blend happens in this. We'll get into that later. Channel mixer, it's not something that you use too much anymore, but it used to be a great way to make a monochrome image. You could come in here and adjust these to make a black and white image. You just want all this stuff to add up to 100. Next, we have color lookup. And these are LUTs. A lot of times these are used for video, and they're just a different way to colorize your image. I think what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to go to File, hit Revert. This is just going to take the image back to how it looked in the beginning. Easier. So we can do color lookup, and I can choose these, and we can pick any of the stuff here, and it's just going to colorize that image using a LUT, which is a little bit different, and you can pick those here. Next, we have invert. So that's just flip-flopping the image, making it from a positive to a negative. Threshold. We will get into threshold later. I think threshold is easier explained. This is a great tool to explain threshold is in sharpening as to what you're doing. And the last one is posterize, and it just gives you some funky effect. Let me turn off threshold. It just does crazy weird things to an image. It's not really that beneficial, but it's there. All right. So those are your different adjustments. Feel free to play around with them to see which ones you do. So the main ones I use are hue saturation. Don't use brightness contrast. I use curves. Rarely I use levels. I definitely occasionally use color balance, but very rarely. Black and white I use all the time. And exposure, vibrance, I don't use. Selective color occasionally. And I use gradient maps a lot. The rest of them, I basically don't use that often. But that's what you have available in the adjustments. There actually are a few more adjustments available, and you get those by going into your layers panel, and you look for the moon that's like half black and half white. If you click on that, you'll notice you got like solid color and pattern and a few other options. And then you've got the rest of the stuff that's also available here. This is just a different way to get an adjustment layer. So I could go solid color, and you can see it does the solid color fill up there. It makes it a layer adjustment. It does not exist up here. That is it for today's video. If you found this helpful, it would be wonderful if you could give us a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave those below. And don't forget to subscribe.